How about displaying some notes? Let's create note cards, and as usual, we are not going to forget about appropriately displaying errors. Hello, welcome to ResoCode, where you are getting prepared for real app development so that you will get freelance clients or a job and be confident about the apps you build. So subscribe and hit the bell to join us on our quest for becoming in-demand Flutter developers. So in this part, we are going to build a totally blank screen when, for example, there are insufficient permissions. Then we are not going to show even a single card, but the whole screen will be saying something to the user regarding the error which occurred, which prevented us from getting any kind of a note from Firestore. So let's get right to it. I have already launched the app, which we are currently building here, and this is what happened. We get an error saying that Firestore or no type Firestore is registered inside getIt. And this is quite weird, to be honest. I don't know why this happened, because if you remember, just in the previous part we were building this UI. I didn't do anything additional. I left off where I stopped the recording, and in the previous part we didn't get any such errors displayed to us. But now, today, apparently Flutter decided to protest. And indeed, which is even more weird, when we go to infrastructure, core, and Firebase injectable module, which we have not touched in quite a while, we can see that we surely do not register Firestore just yet, although I am pretty sure that we did register it. So I don't know what's going on with source control. It's probably just messed up, I'm not sure, or maybe we didn't register it at all at any point of time, but then we should have gotten this kind of an error even in the previous part, right? But anyway, regardless of what the truth is, we just know that we need to register Cloud Firestore with injectable and therefore with getIt as well. And we also need to swap the deprecated annotation register module for just module, which is the new annotation doing the same thing. And now, of course, it's working immediately. That's very interesting. No, it's not working. So of course we need to run flutter pub run build run watch delete conflicting outputs as usual, our favorite command. And now, after hot restarting the app, it should in fact work finally. So let me just hit hot restart key combination, and indeed we can see that everything works as it should. Nice. So now we can move on to the important stuff which we want to tackle in this part. So currently we have the note overview page over here. In the previous part, we have made sure to provide the note watcher block, note actor block. We are listening to the blocks, possibly displaying flush bars, so snag bars when something goes wrong. And we are also navigating whenever a user presses this logout button. We navigate to the sign-in page. But what we are currently not doing is displaying the body of the scaffold. We only have an app bar and a floating action button. And it's going to be precisely inside the body of the scaffold where the notes are going to be shown. But we are not just going to blindly populate body with widgets directly inside of this notes overview page file. Instead, we are going to create a separate file, which is going to be called notes overview body widget.dart, so that we do not just clutter up this single file with too much widget code. So let's do just that. We're going to open up the sidebar, and inside notes overview, we are actually going to create a subfolder widgets. And inside of there, let's first create the notes overview body widget .dart. And in there, let's just create the widget, right? So it's going to be a stateless widget, notes overview body. Let's import material.dart, and yeah, so let's get right to it. We are going to put this widget to be the body of the whole page. So let's go to the page and say notes overview body, just like that. And by the way, as always, you can get the code from the link in the video description to go over it at your own pace. And let's build a UI for the body, right? What's important here is that we need to build the body UI according to the data coming out of the node watcher block, because node watcher block is responsible for providing us either all of the nodes or only the uncompleted nodes. So instead of returning a container, we are going to return a block builder. And this block builder will hold types node watcher block is the block type, and state is of type node watcher state. And now we need to provide the builder parameter, which is a function passing us a context and a state. And from here, we want to map the state to a certain widget. And because we are using freezed unions, mapping the state is absolutely simple. We can just say state map, and we are going to be granted with all of the possible states which can occur and which can arrive into our UI from the node watcher block. And let's just hit Control D or Command D to select all of the nulls. And we are going to change them to be anonymous function invocations, like that. All right. And yeah, after the last one, we are also going to include a comma. Now it's not going to compile because this is invalid syntax. We need to provide what is actually returned from these anonymous functions, but at least we have the commas, or actually the parentheses and the arrows in place. So from the first one, we want to return just a container. If the state is initial, we are not going to display anything. So just a container. Then if load is in progress, of course, we want to display a circular progress indicator. But in addition to that, we also want to wrap it inside a center widget and make the center widget constant, of course, like that. So yeah, this is how we roll. Then let's focus on load success, and then we're going to focus on load failure. So load success is what is actually going to display the actual data, that is the node cards. So this is where we actually do want to access the state, because the state which arrives inside load success holds the nodes which we want to display. So whereas the initial state and the load in progress states, we did not care about the parameter of the function which arrives in there. So we left it as an underscore. We are going to access the state of load success. Therefore, we call it state, so that it's something meaningful which we can access from the function body. Also, this is going to not be an expression bodied method. Instead, it's going to be a method with parentheses, which can have multiple expressions, just so that it's more clear what we are doing in there. And since we want to display a list of node cards which are going to hold the node content, we're going to return a ListView, and we're going to use the builder constructor, and we need to provide the item builder which will build individual items. Now, we want to build items for nodes, because if we take a look at the state contains nodes, which is a KT list of node entities, right? So for each and every entity inside this node list, we want to build an appropriate card in the UI, which will display the content of the nodes to the user. So we first need to grab the node for the appropriate index which the ListView builder is currently trying to build a UI for. So we are going to grab node, final nodes, and it's going to be equal to state nodes at index. Okay, now we need to make sure that we differentiate between successful node data and erroneous node data. That's because if you remember, every single node, if we take a look at it, it can either be valid or invalid. So let's go to the domain layer. If I could find it, I'm going to collapse it. Okay, so nodes, node. Over here, we have the concept of a failure option. So if any single one of the value objects which are held inside the node is invalid, the whole node will be invalid. In that case, we want to display an error card in the UI, which will signify to the user what went wrong and maybe a possible way to fix the issue, or maybe contact support and so on. So over here in the UI, we want to have a check that if nodes.failure option is some, and if there is some failure, that means that the node is in fact invalid, then we want to return an error card, which will signify an error to the user for that particular node. Currently, of course, we do not have any kind of an error card, so we're just going to display a container. Let's just say container colors red, and width will be, let's just say 100 by 100. It doesn't matter, we just want to have something in here. And of course, we are going to change that later on in this tutorial, in this part. And if the data is successful, we're going to return a different kind of container for now, but later on it's going to be the actual node card, which will hold the correct data and display it to the user. All right. Now we have handled the initial state, which doesn't display anything, load in progress, load success, but we still have one more state to go, and that is load failure. So when can load failure occur from our node watcher block? Well, node failure signifies a failure in getting all of the nodes. It doesn't signify failure in just one of the nodes, but all of the nodes, all of the list of nodes could not be gotten. This happens, for example, when there are insufficient permissions. For example, by some magical occurrence, the user tries to access another user's nodes. Of course, this is going to be prevented by the security rules in Firestore, and therefore an exception will occur in the client Firestore library saying that the current user does not have sufficient permissions to access the requested documents of the other user, right? So in that case, we want to display a critical failure display. That's how we are going to call it. We're going to build it later on. For now, we're just going to, again, return a container from here. This one will be larger, 200 by 200, let's just say, and it will be purple, or maybe, I don't know, let's just say yellow, right? Okay, and now the UI code has finally been formatted because there are no longer any errors, and that's nice. But we have index out of bound exception. That is that the list doesn't contain element at index 0. Interesting. I mean, of course, this kind of makes sense because we have just provided the item builder, but nowhere are we saying how many items there are for the list to build. So we also need to provide the item count variable, and we're going to set it to state.nodes size. Now we're talking because we don't have any nodes yet inside Firestore. This is going to result in no containers being displayed in the UI. And we are not going to build the node form in this part, neither in the next part. So in order to have some sort of nodes to work with so that we can see something in the UI, we are going to populate the Firestore database manually. So let's jump into the Firestore console like that, and we are going to populate it. So I have already opened the prepared app, which I have built all the way back in a few months back, right? Before I started recording this tutorial series. And we are going to basically simulate the data which is present in this already finished app. So for example, this thing, we want to have a collection inside the root of the database called users, then user ID, then another collection nodes, and then a note. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, we are going to go to the Firebase console for the app we are currently building. Go to the database tab and say that we do want to create Cloud Firestore database. So let's hit create database. We're going to start in test mode. We are going to populate the security rules later on. Let's select the default location inside United States. And after a while, the database will be created and we are going to populate it manually. Now, as you can see in the already finished app or the database for the app, we need to get hold of the user ID because user IDs are unique per user, of course. So how can we do that? How can we create a collection or a document inside the user collection which will have the ID of a particular user? Well, we are already signed into the app. If you can remember, right? We have signed in with Google, with my Google account. So we already have a user inside the app. And so we can go to the authentication tab. We have users in here, and I should be in there somewhere. I'm actually the single user of the app, and here is the user ID. And we can copy the user ID by pressing this button. And now we can come over to the database and build out the database structure, right? We're going to start a collection users. Next, we're going to create a single document inside of there. We're going to paste there the user ID, which we have just copied from the authentication tab. And this is not going to hold any fields by itself. This user document will only be there to hold a sub-collection. So we're going to start a collection, notes, and now this is going to be a note. Let's just say it's going to have an automatically generated ID. Of course, once we build out nodes from within our app's UI, the IDs are going to be generated locally inside the app with the UUID package. But for now, we're going to generate them over on the Firestore side. And now comes the time to populate the node with fields. So let's take a look which fields should be in there. Well, there should be a body, a color, and all that. So let me just copy all of it from the node which we are copying. So we want to have a body. It's going to be of type string, and you can provide any value you want. I'm just going to paste here, become an in-demand Flutter developer, right? Then another field, which is going to be the color. I'm just going to copy the color number. So it's going to be a number, paste it in there, color. You can provide any number you want. It should be some kind of a color in the end. Then we have server timestamp. So let's add that. Hopefully we can provide a timestamp in here. Surely we can, right? Yeah. So we're just going to say today, and let's say 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. I don't even know how to signify that. Hopefully it's 12, although this is probably going by the 24-hour format, right? I'm not sure. Anyway, that's not the point of this video after all. So we have server timestamp. Now we want to have to-dos, which is the last field, but this is actually an array. So array, to-dos, and to-dos themselves have some fields. So that is done. It's going to be a Boolean. Wait. Yeah, so the name is done. Okay. Oh yeah, actually no, this should be a map. Sorry about that. So a map with the name of done is the field. Boolean true. Then we're going to say ID. ID will be of type string, right? And let's just provide any kind of an ID here. It doesn't really matter. And lastly, the next field is name. Learn all the widgets. Cool. And just like that, after a while, we have created our first node manually. It has body, color, server timestamp, and to-dos, and the to-do has done, ID, and name fields. Okay, so we're going to save that. And we have created our first node. And since we are observing the changes inside the app, now we should just be able to open up the app, and surely we can see that we have this green thing displayed at the top. This signifies successful data, which is nice to know, right? So we have successfully gotten the node, and if we had the appropriate UI in place already, we would be able to see the contents of the node. For now, we just see the green container, which is actually stretched to the sides. It doesn't respect the width which I have provided, but that's cool. So now we probably cannot just copy a document. I'm not sure. Or can we? No, we cannot copy a document in any way. But what we can do is make the document invalid. So instead of learn all the widgets, we are going to say nothing. We're going to provide an empty string. So update that. This is invalid. As you know, to-do names cannot be empty. So what should now happen is that we are going to see a red container, and that's precisely what we see. So our failure and the failure option is working correctly inside the node entity, right? So let's just revert back to successful data, learn all the widgets. And now again, we're going to see a red, or actually a green container at the top as it should be. Cool. And now how can we sort of integration test, but manually, if we can display the yellow thingy, this one, this yellow container, when there is a failure because of insufficient permissions, when we cannot load even a single node. Well, we can test that by changing the security rules. So let's go to the rules tab inside the console. And over here, we are saying allow read write if request time blah blah blah. We're actually going to comment that out, and we're just going to say allow read write false. So no reads or writes are going to be available, or actually possible, if false. This should work at any given point of time, because they're always going to be evaluated to false. So this way, no matter what kind of a collection or document we are trying to obtain, it's always going to fail. So yeah, with that, we should be able to just wait for a while, and we're probably gonna need to refresh the app, because I don't think that security rules trigger the real-time aspect of Firestore. I think we just need to hard restart maybe for the new request to kick in. It didn't yet kick in, so we'll wait for a while until the security rules are in place. So I have waited for a while, but still when I refresh, we get the successful node color displayed, and we do not see the failure container displayed through the whole screen. But this is actually very, very weird, because if I open up the console and go to the debug console, we can see here that Firestore does by itself log that we have missing or insufficient permissions, right? Code permission denied. So indeed, there is something going on which causes us to be denied permissions, and we know precisely what that is. Well, that's because we have set permissions to be false always, right? But somehow, I'm not sure how, even though that the Firebase client does tell us that there are insufficient permissions, we still obtain the nodes from Firestore, which is completely crazy. Because if we take a look at the node watcher block, then inode repository, then watch all, control and F12 to go to the definition of, or actually to the implementation of the watch all method. Here, if we take a look at the map function and at the on error return with function, or the continuation, or however you want to call it, if we hard restart again, the breakpoint will be triggered inside map, and the documents will be populated with one document snapshot, which contains the data we are expecting to not be available, right? Because we have set the read and write permission to be always false. So this is extremely weird. We can read data to which we should have no access. We even get the error printed out by Firestore itself to the debug console saying that there are insufficient permissions, But even through this, we still can read the data, and it appears to be successful, even though it should not be. So if you have any idea what's going wrong here, just let me know in the comments. I'm gonna gladly correct any mistakes I may have made in the past to fix this code, but I'm really not sure what's going on, because you can see that there are insufficient permissions, but even through that we can read the data. So anyway, I guess we're just gonna have to live with that for now. It's indeed very, very weird. But regardless of that, we can still test if the insufficient permissions will display the correct container, the yellow container, and we can do that by just yielding simply always yielding the left side of either containing insufficient permissions. So let's just say yield this, and now whenever we call watch all, we should always see this, right? This is what we want to see. This signifies that there are some errors with the whole Firestore call. So we can test if it works. We know that it does. At least the UI works. Just the integration test failed, sort of, our manual integration test. I'm not sure why again, but let's just continue working, right? So we're actually going to revert this thing here. We're going to allow reads and writes again as previously. Let's publish the changed security rules. And cool. That's it for this part. In the next one, we are going to implement the UI for the cards so that we will no longer display these obnoxious containers just with a different color. We are actually going to create the node cards and the error cards, and also the container which will be responsible for telling the user that something went horribly wrong, if that actually will work in the future. Hopefully the insufficient permissions will trigger something in our code later on. So if you do not want to miss that part and also more tutorials from Flutter, be sure to subscribe to this channel and also join the notification squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here on ResoCoder, I am determined to provide you with the best tutorials and resources so that you will become an in-demand Flutter developer. And if you are serious about becoming a great Flutter developer who can build real apps for clients or at the job, go to flutter.education to get the top curated Flutter news and resources aimed at improving your app development career. Over there, you can also subscribe to my mailing list to get the best Flutter resources delivered weekly right into your inbox. If this video helped you, give it a like and also share with other developers who are surely going to find it beneficial too. Leave a comment if you have anything to say, and see you in the next